than 200 years ago, Americans fought a revolution. A revolution against big government.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and has sent hither swarms of officials to harass our people and eat out their substance.
George III and his bureaucrats taxed and controlled their lives until the people said, enough. The government in Washington, D.C. makes you nostalgic for old King George. The royal tax collectors took about 25% from our ancestors. This year, government at all levels will extract 6% of our money to waste. And not gently. IRS agents use wiretaps, mail openings, informants, disguises, guns, chains, and jails to get every last dime. Meanwhile, at the Federal Reserve, 12 faceless bureaucrats decide your economic future. In secret. How much inflation should there be next year? What should interest rates be? How much of your savings should be transferred to politicians and their favored big banks? The Supreme Court, where individual rights are supposed to be protected, think it's fine if government invades our financial privacy, spies on us in our bedrooms, regulates church schools, and restricts our free speech. Meanwhile, at the Congress, everything is up for grabs, as long as it's yours.
I'm Pamela Wistrom, co-host of On Second Thought. And now, for the host and star of this 14-year, weekly-long TV show. Oh, are you ready? The one and only Willaim J. Wagener.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pamela. Tonight, people, we have a show. We have the California 18, or most of them, here on the set. Unfortunately, a few of them were not able to be here tonight, but we have a large crowd here. Among the California 18 here, we hope you will get to know how to defend yourself against what I call the merciless bank gangsters. I'm not an expert, but we've got some people who are close as anything you're ever going to meet to an expert, each in their own specific field. So please pay close attention. With me as our first guest here on the studio is Jack Sooty. Thanks for being with us, Jack. Tell us what you want to tell us what we need to know.
Okay. Thank you, Willaim, for having all of the most of us, the California 18. What a pleasure to have us here. As a group, I'm looking at you all for the first time together, and I'll tell you, it's an impressive thing. We are fed up with our judiciary and our prosecutors. We are here gathered because our hearts are pouring out to you, the listeners, to believe that there is corruptness out there going on with our titles, with our properties. They're being stolen, and we need to have your help with us getting the ear of the Attorney General to produce some prosecutions. We know for a fact that people are out there still to this day, after the settlements, after the agreements with the banks, that are still committing fraud. These are not misdemeanors. These are not petty offenses or infractions. These are felonious accounts that people are still doing, and nobody is getting prosecuted. We need to stop this. Our prosecuting agencies have a responsibility, and they've taken an oath to enforce it, and we're sick and tired of the fact they're not doing anything. I myself am a victim. I need to have some justice. I can't get it. For 4 years, I've been fighting my bank, and nothing's been done to prosecute the 4 felonies. Nothing. I've asked 3 agencies, San Diego County DA, Ventura County DA, and now the Attorney General. They don't return my calls, write me back. They ignore me. That's not justice.
Wow. Jack, tell me, Is there a website you would recommend people to look at?
Well, I think you have to be careful when you're on the internet and anywhere you go. We're probably going to be feeding you some information here down the road that will tend to give you some direction as to where you can go. Each of us has our own way here tonight, and some of us will be giving you some websites or ideas of where to go. I know an old site that we used to be on, and we started a long time ago, was called Homeowners for Justice. C.J. Holmes started that. She was the founder of the California 18, and why we are here. We have 18 spreadsheets that we put together, and it's a large document that we had blown up.
Go ahead, Jack.
I have an assignment of my deed of trust, which is one of the 3 or 4 documents that everybody has on their land record, usually, predominantly, and it's the first step that the bank uses to falsify records. They record this on your property. They don't have the legal right most of the time to even do it. It's not their loan. They hide behind the crowd of judges who support them because they won't send them to jail.
Is that the document there?
This is an assignment of deed of trust, and what this is the first document of many, including some promissory notes that are being forged, and the signature that you see scribbled there, that is supposed to be the legal signature on a legal document, and it's not. You'll see it's a scribbling, and the gentleman's name that's there, Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems, has no knowledge of who he is, and yet he signed it as a representative of theirs.
Wow, is that a robo-signature?
It most certainly is, and it's still going on to this day.
Jack, tell us your credentials.
I'm a former police officer from Illinois and San Diego. Been a licensed detective, licensed in California, and part of the time I was licensed in Nevada as a private investigator. I'm a forensic specialist dealing with mortgage fraud and the representation of title fraud, and I work with many other people, including my peers here tonight. I've got about 6,000 investigations under my belt, and I've saved 20 people from losing their homes.
Wow, that's certainly worthy of an applause. Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate you being here. Now we're going to turn to my next guest, Renee. Renee's on my side. Thank you, Renee, for being here.
Thank you, William. Thank you very much.
Tell us what you think people should know, Renee.
Well, what I think you should know is that if you're paying a mortgage, or you think you're paying a mortgage, you might want to look into who you're actually paying. We can tell you unequivocally that we have none of us seen a legal document for anyone with a right to take your home or to collect money from you. We approached a year ago C.J. Holmes, our founder. We got to give her a round. C.J. Holmes amazingly brought together a show. We did a daily show for an hour in education. Through this show, we found that oaths and bonds were being violated. We found that we all came together with all our illegal documents with Recon Trust and Bank of America. And so what happened was, those were the two starting. Now I can tell you, everyone here, we represent every fraudster in the nation and the world. This doesn't just mean the United States, it goes international. We have every bank involved, not just, we have Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Deutsche Bank, we have Chase, JP Morgan. Thank you, Mr. Diamond, because you're still in homes and you're still in your chair. We're out to get you. You're going to leave that chair unless you can get into a chair we really would like to see you in. We've got every servicer, Ocwen, Litton, Aurora. We have Recon Trust, we have Quality Loan Servicing, two of which in California are not paying any property or business taxes. We cannot find them paying business taxes any county in California.
Who is this, Renee?
Recon Trust, who is part of why we, the 18, are together.
And they're registered in California.
And they're not paying any business taxes.
And they pay no taxes.
Zero. Oh, but Quality Loan Servicing does in Washington.
What?
Wow.
Yes. Now, we contacted Kamala Harris. C.J. Holmes sent 18 cases, and it was sent directly. We were told we were going to get some action. A year.
All right. Willaim Wagener here for On Second Thought. I'm sorry for the glitch. This is live television, people. And the city is trying to kill it. They let the equipment, though they claim they have to spend all the money to maintain equipment, and then they don't maintain the equipment. Wi-Fi went down, and that's where we lost the signal. What I was playing for you that mysteriously glitched was the California 18. Now, had I known the studio people, the city that maintained this public access, that's public educational governance called PEG, were going to let the Wi-Fi die, I would have brought in the hard copies and played you the California 18. But the point they were making is that people are losing their homes not because they're lazy and don't want to work hard and pay their mortgages. In almost all cases, they've paid their mortgages and paid them, and they still get their homes stolen. Heck, Teddy Sheldon out in Riverside County, one of the most so completely opaque court systems, let attorneys steal Theodore Sheldon, that's Teddy Sheldon's home, and she didn't even have a mortgage. The mortgage had been paid off for a decade. Nevertheless, between her homeowners association and the crooked bar members of Riverside, they were able to steal her home and evict her for a home that had no mortgage on it. It had been paid off. I look at that and I look back at the Los Angeles Daily Journal, February 17th, 2016, just a year and 2 months ago. That's the headline. There's what I consider one of the best justices we've had on the Supreme Court for a very long time. His name was Antoine Scalia. And the title is, Scalia's death may signal a dramatic Ninth Circuit shift. Well, that's really interesting. Why would anything shift? If all these guys are carrying out the law and upholding the Constitution, why should anything change at all? So there was a period after he died, Obama was still the Pontus, polluting the White House, the people's White House, built with the people's tax money, we the people. The corporations didn't build that White House. It was built with real, honest money when we had silver and gold. Now we're on the bank gangsters' Ponzi scheme money. And I wanted to read you an article I posted on my Facebook. If you go to Willaim J. Wagener on Facebook, you'll see Renee Powers, who did that right after Jack Sooty, the retired police officer. She wrote this article, and she points out that doing that television show about 2.5 years ago called the California 18, and you look for on YouTube, you'll find it under Willaim Wagener channel, and it's California 18, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, because at the time YouTube wouldn't allow us to put the whole thing up in one long thing. You had to, it was 70 minutes, then they allowed 10 minutes, then it was 15 minutes, and finally you can put up as long a YouTube clip as you want. As the capacity for the internet expanded in 2015. Anyway, Scalia's great ruling is found in 504. And if you look at Wikipedia for 504 U.S. 36, U.S. versus Williams, it will say to you, this was about the prosecutor not having to give all the exculpatory evidence to a grand jury. Now, for those of you who are completely clueless, a grand jury is not the defendant's petite jury of 12 plus 2 alternates. That's not a grand jury. That's a petite jury. And it's one of the fundamental reasons many innocent people, like Michael Jackson and many, many others, have not gone to prison. Because a jury could see through the BS that the criminals, also known as prosecutors, yeah, I'm calling most prosecutors are criminals, including my cousin, Thomas Reynolds, who's in a completely different state. You know, he was happy to prosecute people just because somebody didn't like him. He wanted to be a judge. Anyway, I digress. I want to stick to Antoine Scalia Born in 1936, which was the heart of the Depression, Scalia was Catholic, Roman Catholic. Right after his mysterious death on the border of Mexico and Texas, where he had never been before, we had this weird thing happen. The weird thing was he died holding a pillow over his face. Who goes to bed asleep and then holds a pillow over their face and then has a heart attack? Well, if you're struggling to get air and someone's covering your face with a pillow and you're being suffocated, it could cause your heart to have a malfunction. The really ironic thing about Scalia's death is that there was no forensic police investigation. Some local boo-boo cop in that winky-dinky little county in Texas told somebody, oh, it looks like he died of natural causes. Okay, natural causes. And that was it. This was a Supreme Court of the United States justice. And he didn't get justice. There should have been a very careful, detailed autopsy. We now know that President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who reigned for a brief period from January of 1961 till November 22nd, 1963, he was murdered. It was a cold, calculated murder. And I'll tell you flat out, the CIA was in on it, but they weren't the prime culprits. The FBI was in on it. Specifically, the FBI director, Edgar Hoover, that cross-dressing gay fat man who his second in command of the FBI was his bumper buddy, his gay bumper buddy, okay? And this is the same Edgar Hoover that the mafia, I'm not even saying which mafia family, but one of the mafia families, one of the biggies, had photos of him dressed as a woman doing sexual things with the number 2 guy at the FBI. Now, the FBI people don't want to talk about this. They don't want to even have the discussion. They don't want to acknowledge it. But maybe that's the reason, people, and I'm talking way back, years, decades ago, Edgar Hoover continually said there is no such thing as a mafia, organized crime in America. If there was, I'd know about it and I would take care of it because I'm Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI. Well, the reason he never did is because they had a picture of him dressed as a woman doing sexual things with the number 2 guy at the FBI. That's why he conveniently could not find the mafia. Until some good New York state cops, raided a mafia function where all the heads of the families were gathered somewhere in upstate New York. Then all of a sudden, Edgar Hoover had to acknowledge that the mafia existed. It was now in a state jurisdiction. He couldn't control it. So when you got corrupt people like Edgar Hoover, who can be blackmailed because he's a gay, fat, cross-dressing wacko who was blackmailing everybody in Congress because they were all having affairs on their wives and doing weird stuff with underage kids, he had them all under control. The reason he had them under control, the Congress, is because he could blackmail them all. But the mafia had Edgar Hoover under control. So, you see where I'm going? There's nobody in government you can trust. We can't even trust the Wi-Fi here to pull something down off of YouTube, which I was showing you, California 18. But that's okay. Scalia's death may signal a dramatic Ninth Circuit shift. Well, Obama wanted to appoint somebody wacko, crazy liberal that hates the Constitution, wants to destroy our fundamental Bill of Rights, and the Republicans held them at bay for a long time until they could get this recent guy appointed under Trump. Now, we don't really know how he's going to be. He hasn't been in office on the Supreme Court long enough to make an imprint so we can figure out whether he's in Scalia's vein of sticking to the exact textual context of the words of the Constitution, or can we just amend it as we feel, as the ether makes us feel good? You know? Pamela, where are you? This would be a good time for Pamela to come bouncing in here with her lively personality. But she's only available on YouTube. So the point of the California 18 is Kamala Harris, who now got promoted by the bank gangsters to another position she doesn't deserve after doing a terrible job as Attorney General, because the California came with her and brought hard evidence that the banks are engaged in a Ponzi scheme and massive fraud, that the clerks of some of the counties and the district attorneys and a big chunk of the Bar Association are all criminals. Kamala Harris was like, I hear no evil, I see no evil, and I will speak no evil. Just let them go on feloniously stealing people's homes. The whole money scheme is a Ponzi scheme. And one of the ways they're trying to support it is by stealing real assets and to hold it up. What they ought to do is what Iceland did. We need an Icelandic revolution. You know what they did in the little tiny nation, the little volcanic rock where people live and they call themselves Icelanders? They arrested the bankers, put them in jail. Of course, they had to throw out their entire parliament and elect a whole new parliament. They had a plebiscite. You know what a plebiscite is? A plebiscite is when you have a national vote and all the people get to vote. Do we throw out the whole government and put in a new one? And I would say that's exactly what America needs to do. We need to throw out all of the representatives, maybe not Rand Paul, U.S. Senator from Kentucky, but virtually all the rest, including Kamala Harris and the other fiendish ghoul from California in the U.S. Senate, all our congressmen, throw them out. Start with people who have never been in government, so they haven't had time to be corrupted yet. They will get corrupted after 5 or 6 years. Then we got to throw them out again. That's why they had elections. But the elections are rigged, number one. And I brought you that guy many times, showing you where he's testifying to Congressman Conyers in Ohio State House, not in Washington, D.C., where apparently they ran out of hearing rooms because he was testifying that the vote machine that we use in Santa Barbara County, the vote scanning machine, put out by Diebold and Sequoia and similar type garbage machines, can flip the vote. So you vote one way, your vote counts the other way. So your vote has no integrity. The only vote that you can count on is when you're on a grand jury, which is like 17 to 25, or you're on a petite jury, and you look at it and you say, you know what, this Michael Jackson guy, he's innocent. All this rotten snake they call Mad Dog Sneddon, God burn his soul in hell where he belongs. I hope he has no peace. Forgive me, Jesus. The guy was just such a... One of these shows, before they take us off the air, I'm going to do a show just on how rotten Tom Sneddon and his family was. Not just him. He had relatives. Anyway, I'm not going to go there today. One of the things that I found really interesting is this guy, his name is Daniel Dydzak. D-Y-D-Z-A-K. Daniel came here on the show. Yeah, on this show, on Second Thought. And he's coming back soon. And he flat out says the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, the number one justice guy, is a thief. Ron George. Of course, he retired when the pressure started to build up because he had taken the funds. He somehow got Schwarzenegger to give him a chunk of money and he was going to administer the courts. But a lot of it seemed to just disappear into his pockets, his own pockets, the Chief Justice pockets. probably went to a Swiss bank account through an electronic transfer. And at that same time, here in Santa Maria and in Santa Barbara and all over California, they were closing the courts 1/2 day a week. And they said, we got to save money, we got to save money. There isn't enough money. Why wasn't there enough money? Because Ronald George apparently was stuffing it in his pockets and transferring it to an offshore bank account. Now, you're not going to hear this discussed on tonight's CBS that brings you all the news that is vital for you to know. You ain't going to hear it. You ain't going to see it. Because all the corporate television, none of them are free of debt. Every year, they have to refinance their entire operation. And if they speak out against the bank gangsters, I'm talking specifically Chase, Morgan, Rockefeller, but essentially they're all little fingers on the Rothschild octopus that strangles the world's economy. President Andrew Jackson, in his day, back in the 1830s, was famous for saying, I killed the bank. Which bank was he talking about? He was talking about the second central bank of the United States, which was a Rothschild-funded thing. But most congressmen didn't even know that. Most people had no clue. And they would expand and contract the economy and steal people's assets by foreclosing on their businesses. Now they own pretty much all the major corporations, have controlling stock. They're probably worth something like 550 trillion with a T. But they claim they're only worth a few billion. That's nonsense. You have to look at all the corporations they control. They control the CIA, they control the FBI. Kennedy was going to keep us out of war as soon as he won re-election, so they had to kill him. He was going to issue silver dollars, and he made an order, I think it was order 11110, to issue and mint silver dollars back in 1963. And they were minted, but not while he was alive. They were minted. The order was finally carried out in 64. And then his successor, who was also a conspirator in his murder, you have to read Philip Nelson's book, The Assassination of JFK by LBJ. Philip F. Nelson, I forget the website, but if you go to my YouTube, Google it, it's there. Anyway, Diedzack, I finally got him on the show, and I've been trying to get him here for 5 years. I want you to see just a little bit of what he said here just a month ago on, I think it was March 22nd, a little over a month ago. And he's coming back. The next show will shake the foundations of the California Supreme Court. Here we go. Another story we're going to get into someday. Right now we have Dan Dydzak, and believe me, he told you the truth. I've been trying to get him up here to expose his corruption at least for the last 5 years. And Dan would always say to me, just wait, William, I'm filing this motion, and this is going to stick it to them, and they're going to be forced to admit I was right, and then I'll come in with my victory parade showing how I won. And they never let him win. And in fact, now, I guess the clerk has got your number blocked, so you can't even call the clerk of the court.
Well, let me tell you what has happened in the last few years. I filed, all my lawsuits have merit. I didn't have a history when I was practicing of filing frivolous lawsuits. I filed meritorious lawsuits. And every time I filed them, what they did was they tried to summarily dismiss them either on a procedural ground or right away. They wouldn't even let me, like when you play a baseball game, they wouldn't even let me run to first base, let alone get on first base. You're supposed to, in a legal proceeding, the law is supposed to favor you having a trial on the merits to vindicate your rights. That's what they call the rule of law. That's what Antonin Scalia, the great justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, had just passed away. He wrote in an article in a Chicago law school article about the rule of law. It's a well-known article that the society is governed by the rule of law. So you're supposed to have everybody that have constitutional or civil rights violated have a right to go before a jury or a fair and impartial judge to vindicate their rights. What they've done with me instead is portrayed me as some wacko and some vexatious litigant. because to vindicate my rights, unfortunately, I have to sue a lot of judges that were involved, such as judges like Ronald George. And I know another judge that's about to retire from the California Supreme Court, Justice Whittaker. She took illegal, illicit financial payments from Charles Schwab, and I'll tell you what that's based on. She's about to leave the bench. Justice Whittaker was involved with her husband, who's a doctor, in a place in San Francisco called Institute of Aging. And Charles Schwab would give big donations to the Institute of Aging, run by Catherine Whittaker's hospital, called the Institute of Aging, very well known in San Francisco. That's an illegal conflict of interest for Justice Whittaker to have been involved in the decision to illegally disbar me, because she's not supposed to have a financial conflict of interest. I found out about this. This was put on a Leslie Brody report with this rabbi journalist by the name of Simon Levi, who later on got unfortunately prosecuted himself and illegally monitored by the FBI. But suffice to say, she had a financial conflict of interest. Just like I found out that other judges that I've been involved with have had financial interest with Charles Schwab. So what you've had is Charles Schwab giving preferential, and his business entities giving preferential financial treatment, what I consider bribes, frankly, to affect things. And a judge, under the canons of both the federal judges and the state judges, are not supposed to have financial conflicts of interest. So what happened recently, the thing you're referring to, I have a present case that was in the Oakland federal court. And he wanted me to come on the air before I filed. He even wanted to cover it live with the cameras in San Francisco and Oakland. And
I did.
And
he wouldn't let me.
And I got assigned originally to, there was a magistrate, I asked that she not hear the case. I got assigned to a judge who's the brother of one of the Supreme Court judges. I moved for his...
That's kind of cozy. That's
Charles
cozy.
Charles Breyer. So he, to his credit, disqualified himself on his own motion, because he looked at my lawsuit and knew everything was legit. And, I then get assigned to a young judge by the name, she's young in terms of a judicial career, who was a former Oakland Superior Court judge, called Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers. I look up her profile and, I've said to myself, I can't move to, there's some things maybe that I don't like about her, but I'm going to go with her. I file the lawsuit, I serve it on her. They bring motions to dismiss. I continue a status conference. All of a sudden, she comes out with this cockamamie ruling saying that I don't have a right to further proceedings. And she writes, this is one of the most idiotic things, and I'm going to say it right to her face when she sees this video, Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers. She says in her decision that basically judges can never be sued. In other words, if a judge violates your civil and constitutional rights, such as takes bribes, you can't sue them to set aside their decision. Now that is absurd. That's what she wrote. The U.S. Supreme Court has recognized in recent case law that a judge can be sued when they act in the absence of jurisdiction. In other words, if a judge takes bribes or has improper communications or has conflicts of interest, you can sue. She wrote in her ridiculous decision that you can never sue judges, and threw up my whole case. I found out that she had conflicts of interest. She was friends with a former state bar president, Jeffrey Breyer. She was friends with Camilla Harris, who was representing Ronald George.
She's a crook.
So she did a crooked decision. And so I moved to disqualify her right before Christmas time of last year.
Of last year, you're talking about?
In December of last year, I moved to disqualify her, filed a major motion. It took them a month or so to rule on it. They assigned it to this Judge Wilkin, Claudia Wilkin, who was the former chief judge of the Northern District of California. She's a senior judge in the Oakland Federal Court. She denied it with a page and a half, 2 pages. Oh, there's nothing to your allegations, which was extremely detailed. I won't bore the viewers with the details. I thought to myself, well, this is a crazy decision. Let me check out her background. I found out when I looked at her financial disclosure statements that are published by...
you mean a Form 700?
Well, it's I don't know if they call it. It's a federal disclosure form. There's a Judicial Watch based out of Washington, D.C. that disclosed Hillary Clinton's emails. They put up a lot of her disclosure statements, financial disclosure statements. I found out, you got to remember, my case is called Diedzack versus Charles Schwab. I'm alleging that Charles Schwab basically gave illegal financial contributions or his entities to various people, including judges, and thereby violated my rights, and I'm entitled to damages against Charles Schwab. The case is Diedzack versus Schwab. I put in Ronald George, I put in Eric George, I put in Alan Rothberg, all sorts, and I basically said they interfered with previous litigation, tortiously interfered. It was a very strongly drafted lawsuit. I find out that Claudia Wilken, when I look at some of her financial disclosure statements, has about 40% or so, 35 to 40% of her financial portfolio with Charles Schwab, which means, in no uncertain terms, under the standards of conduct for a federal district judge or any federal judge, including the judge that's about to be hopefully appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, including Justice Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court, they cannot have a financial conflict of interest. So, I appealed it because I didn't know it at the time. I had no choice. It's now in front of the appellate court of the Ninth Circuit. They won't rule. I asked for a fee waiver because it's expensive. I can qualify right now in my situation. They won't rule on it. But what I found out about Claudia Wilken is that I look at it as bribes and financial conflicts of interest at a minimum. I went ahead and sent in an ethics complaint against Claudia Wilken to the clerk of the Ninth Circuit. Her name is Molly Dwyer, and they're based in San Francisco. You send in like original plus 4 copies. They won't file it. Sidney Thomas, who's now the chief judge of the Ninth Circuit, who's based in Billings, Montana, he won't tell the clerk to file it. In my world, I'm sure in William's world, that's obstruction of justice.
I would think so. I think, isn't that the clerk's job? When a clerk receives a document, isn't that their specific job to file stamp it and file it?
Right. And there's even a case, which I cited in a recent letter to President Donald Trump and others.
You could sue the clerk.
Okay, well, there's a case I cited in my recent letter called Holt versus Virginia.
Holt versus Virginia.
Now, this was a case based out where the Supreme Court of the United States unanimously held, now you're talking 9 judges, that a person who is defending or prosecuting a case has a right to file documents and pleadings and writings to advance or defend his or her case. Unanimous decision of the U.S. Supreme Court back in, I think, 1965. I quoted it in my letter to Donald Trump recently. The point is, when a clerk of a court, of a federal court especially, federal clerks are supposed to uphold the U.S. Constitution, the Due Process Clause under the 14th Amendment.
I think they take an oath to do that.
They take an oath to do it. She won't file it. And you were looking at a letter that I just sent to Mr. Trump and President Trump and others.
Let's show this letter. Here's the front page. Daniel Dydzak, Marina Del Rey, and he's addressing to Donald Trump, President, White House, Honorable John Roberts, Chief Justice, FBI Director James Comey, Honorable Sidney R. Thomas, Chief Judge, Jeffrey Sessions, Esquire, Attorney General of the United States, and Molly C. Dwyer, clerk of the
Dwyer.
I
want to mention
clerk of the Ninth District. That's all on the front page.
I also CC'd that letter to Don McGaff, who's the White House counsel, Stephen Bannon, who, as you know, was with Breitbart News, who's now the chief White House strategist, Senator Grassley, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee,
Bring up that page.
And Senator Feinstein, senior senator of California. And I want to mention on this broadcast to all those people like Ronald George that will probably watch this, I've been in active communication with the Trump administration and people like Senator Grassley's staff about the corruption of the California and federal judiciary.
You heard it here. On page 2, you see on page 2 of this document that Mr. Diedzack just mailed off yesterday, he states, the clerk of the Ninth District Court of Appeals has apparently not filed my good faith and legitimate ethics complaint against Oakland, California federal judge Claudia Wilken. This was submitted and then resubmitted some time ago by the undersigned. Among the allegations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Next paragraph, he addresses Chief Judge Thomas. You are condoning, satisfying, and otherwise consenting to illegal criminal actions by the clerk of the Ninth Circuit, Molly Dwyer. Said clerk, in not filing the ethics complaint against Judge Wilken, is committing an act of obstruction of justice, pure and simple. People, this is why Donald Trump should appoint a special panel to start indicting federal judges. And it's why I've quoted Anthony Scalia over and over This is where you people need to get involved. We, the people, need to get involved and form a grand jury under that case, U.S. versus Williams in 1992, where Scalia wrote for the majority, and the citation is 504 U.S. 36. I don't have to read it off a teleprompter. It's burned in my brain. And Scalia says, we, the people, stand as an independent fixture, like a fourth branch of government, when the first three are so corrupt. And it's up to us to form that grand jury. And when we do, when we, the people, not appointed by any judge, not led by the nose by any district attorney or U.S. prosecutor, when we, the people, form that, Scalia writes, don't take my word for it. Please go read it yourself. Just Google 504 U.S. 36. Scalia wrote, and this is really important, they can indict even a judge, a justice, anyone in the other three branches of government. They can issue a true bill of indictment based on evidence or their personal knowledge. This sets the grand jury as the fix-it-all mechanism of all fix-it mechanisms. When the courts are this corrupt, and they are corrupt with no redeeming grace. You know, they used to have this pornography ruling where they said there's some social redeeming value in some amount of pornography. There is no redeeming value in a corrupt court system.
I want to point out a famous statement that Earl Warren used to say, the Chief Justice. The reason why he knew about corruption, my friend just found out that I'm with today, he found out that Earl Warren's father was unfortunately murdered, and maybe that was his incentive to become a district attorney. He was the district attorney of San Francisco when Melvin Belli was practicing in that great city. And he ended up being the governor. Then he was appointed to being the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. And you know what he used to start every conference with when they would take a vote on which cases to accept and how to rule? Apparently, this is what I read, he would start the conference, because he started off because he was the Chief Justice. Is it fair? He'd look at every case. The first thing would say, is it fair? For example, remember when Muhammad Ali stood up for his rights that he was conscientiously objecting to the Vietnam War. Is it fair? So here I am, before I went to the William here and exercised my First Amendment rights and due process rights, freedom of expression. Here I am trying in the court system to do it properly for years. Practiced law for years as an advocate. Was respectful for years to judges and to adversaries and to all these people. And here I can't even file a document like an ethics complaint, a valid ethics complaint against a crooked federal judge who upon information and belief took bribes from Charles Schwab or his related entities, or has at a bare minimum financial conflicts of interest. Now under the federal authority, which is in a statute called 28 U.S.C. 455, a federal judge cannot have financial conflicts of interest. And to disqualify a judge, it's not about just an actual conflict, it's an appearance of a conflict.
That's right. You can't even have, the actual statute says you're not allowed to even have the appearance of a conflict. And we're way past appearance. We're blatant, in your face, got a conflict of interest.
And I'm going to tell you something.
Run all the pages of this letter to Donald Trump, which today's the 22nd. This was just mailed yesterday. Donald, I hope you pay attention and look at this letter. It's in the mail. You should have it. Your staff should have it before Friday.
And I point out in the letter.
Yeah, go through all the pages of this letter.
That I've been illegally monitored by a rogue FBI agent. I've been wiretapped yesterday. As I've been talking to William, I believe in good faith that I've been wiretapped when I've talked to him and others. Several times I've had people's calls interrupted. I've had and now, to add insult and injury, when I'm talking about that ethics complaint against that federal judge, they block, if I call up my regular cell phone number, which is on this letterhead, if I call them, you know what it says when I call the number? Invalid number. They block my number to the Ninth Circuit general number to the clerk's office without due process, without notice. In other words, if they thought that I was some crazy wacko, they would have to file a proceeding, an order to show cause, or a restraining order type of proceeding and say, come into court, Mr. Diedzack, and explain why we shouldn't block you from calling our clerks, because you're upsetting them, because you're saying that judges on that court are taking bribes or having improper financial conflicts of interest. You're saying that your documents don't get filed. I've had numerous pleadings that they won't file. In my world, that's obstruction of justice. I'm sure in William's world, that's obstruction of justice. That's unconstitutional. There's a Civil Rights Act for a reason. We're allowed as citizens of this country, or as people living here legally, we're allowed to vindicate our rights in the federal court system. When a state actor, such as Ronald George, takes away my license to practice law illegally, I'm allowed to go in front of a federal judge on the Civil Rights Act and other remedies and pursue my remedies. I'm allowed to have a trial on the merits. This is absurd. Just like, the due process, and you might have noticed that President Trump recently at a press conference about 2 weeks ago said there were a lot of problems with the Ninth Circuit, referring to the executive order that they wouldn't let come in. And he had probably by that point received my various I've written several letters to him. Now, I'm not saying he himself read it, but I'm sure somebody on his staff, like his White House counsel, have told him about it. And certainly, this should be of concern to the President of the United States, that I don't expect him to write me a direct letter back, but what I want him to do, and what I want Jeffrey Sessions to do, and other people like that, and FBI Director Comey, I want them to carry out a criminal investigation why the clerk of the Ninth Circuit is not filing my documents. That's a criminal act. I want them to do an inquiry why several judges of the Ninth Circuit and other federal judges below them are, like this Judge Wilkins of Oakland, are taking bribes or having illegal financial incentives from Charles Schwab or his entities. I've got a list in that letter of various Ninth Circuit judges that I have done research on that have financial conflicts of interest with Charles Schwab. They're listed in there. There's former Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit, Alex Kaczynski, Kim McLean Wardlaw. I want to name them because they'll be watching this. Mylan D. Smith, based out of Los Angeles. Ronald M. Gould, M. Margaret McCowan, Marcia Berzon. Now, on that list, except for Judge Gould, they're all being presently sued in the Oakland case that was illegally dismissed that I appealed. And you know what they've done in my appeal? They've stalled it. They won't give me a fee waiver. And if I gave them the $505, fine. You know what they would do? They would still summarily dismiss it because it's rigged. So I intend, if necessary, to file another lawsuit. And I put right in that letter that if I have to sue the present Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit, Sidney Thomas, I will. Here I'm telling him in repeated letters, this letter you're seeing is only one of several letters I've written. I've told him repeatedly that my documents and pleadings aren't being filed. He doesn't do anything about it. And he is the Chief Judge of the Ninth Circuit. Now, he replaced Alex Kaczynski. And I want to mention something about Alex Kaczynski, for example. He was publicly reprimanded years ago because he had a website, apparently, that had animal porn with him. And he was publicly reproved.
Was that proven? I don't know if that was actually
yes,
proven.
He had it. Well, he claimed it was his son's or somebody else's site, but he got a public reproval from it. This is the kind of person, now, that they put in charge of the Ninth Circuit for years. And what they do on civil rights cases involving pro se litigants or someone like me that they don't like, then they claim that someone that's representing themselves. Now, I've gone to numerous attorneys about representing me. And you know what they all say to me? Dan, we know you're right, but we can't represent you because we're worried about losing our bar license if we represent you. We're worried about repercussions. Then, I'm going to tell you about the mainstream media. I spoke to Leslie Stahl's assistant of 60 Minutes before she did the interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger. They listened to me for 45 minutes. You know, she said they said,
did what?
Did nothing. Now,
Exactly.
let me tell you what
45 minutes, and they did. Leslie Stahl did nothing,
Okay.
which is why Willaim Wagener, this guy, continues to do the show. So when there's a whistleblower, like former bar card holder Daniel Dydzak wants to blow the whistle, there's somewhere for him to go.
And I want to make it clear, I'm still fighting to get reinstated because I deserve to be reinstated. And I'm going to tell you two famous quotations that happened to me that show how the system is rigged. When I spoke to Ronald George, the one that you tried to call on his cell phone, the former Chief Justice, you know what he said to me on the phone once when I was trying to settle? Nobody cares what you have to say. That's an exact quotation from him. You know what he was basically saying to me when he said that? He was basically saying to me that I rigged the system and I talked to judges, both federal and state, and you're not going to go anywhere with your lawsuits. That's what he was in effect saying to me. Just like when Alan Rothenberg, a crooked banker, former State Bar president, who's money laundering for the Georges, when he goes ahead and says that, he went, I'm going to get you. So they think because they're connected. So, you know, I figured.
Well, people, we're back live here in the studio. That was a clip from March 22nd when we did a show on Wednesday with disbarred or excommunicated from the religious mafia cult of the Bar Association, Daniel Dydzak, with more than 20 years experience, graduate of 2 law schools, got a bachelor and he's got a master's degree in law, and they don't like him speaking truth. So he's off. I want to take a minute here to tell you about this new CD. It's available at Boo Boo's Cheap Thrills in San Luis Obispo County. It's also available at Game Exchange in Aurora Grande and On the Record in Pismo Beach. Also in Orcutt, a little town south of Santa Maria, it's available at the Paradise Trading and Record Post there, right by the CVC pharmacy, right in the corner. It's called Paradise. So if you want to get this, it's some really good songs. We were just playing a little bit in the background there for you. I like that first song today. You need something positive to bring me up in the morning, because things like Willie Nelson walking off the stage, I guess in Santa Barbara Bowl last Saturday, his guitar was out of tune. And he was starting to play Whiskey River, and he just walked off. And his drummer and his other musicians just kept on playing, and 10, 15 minutes later, he walks back on. His guitar is completely out of tune, I am told, by people that were there. But they didn't care. They just loved Willie. He's 84 years old, and he's still playing. He's still going on circuit, making people happy. I mean, what more can you do in life than to make other people happy? So they didn't even care. Nobody asked for their money back. They were so thrilled to see Willie, 84 years old, still playing his good old tunes. And he didn't look like he looks today. When he started, the first clip I saw of him on TV, he looked like an FBI agent. Clean cut, crew cut, hair tight, clean shaven. But his fans loved him. So I just wanted to mention that and remind you, you can get this album today. It's got 10 songs on it, brand new, all copyrighted, never heard, but it sounds like the 60, by John Henry Cassani, today at Paradise Records in Orcutt. Also Boo Boo's and Cheap Thrills in San Luis Obispo, the Game Exchange in Aurora Grande, and On the Record in Pismo Beach. All have these for sale. I can't tell you what the price is, but they're available and they will lift your spirits. I want to bring your attention now, we're going to get back to Mr. Diedzack, to the fact that we're living in an American Nazi regime. And it's not because Trump is president. Trump just capitalized on the broiling, simmering anger of Americans, having their children kidnapped by the government with false statements, false court records, having their homes stolen with criminal Ponzi scheme running banks like Bank New York Mellon, who Cindy Brown is fighting. 10 years her identity's been stolen. And the DA of Orange County, he won't lift a finger, even though she's got a letter from Michelle Lipton, which we've shown you in the past. She's got a letter with Michelle Lipton signing this letter saying, hey, to the guy that wrote the first fraudulent mortgage note and signed her name, the letter is addressed to that guy, and it says, desist and refrain from any further activity. And he just kept on doing it. And Tony Rackauckus, the rat of Orange County, the guy that should have gone to prison with that crooked sheriff, remember Mike Corona? I called him out like 10 years ago on my TV show, on my personal Facebook, on my On Second Thought website. I said, Mike Corona's a crook. Lindy Cater's daughter couldn't have been murdered so quickly, efficiently, and brushed aside without Sheriff Mike Corona having a hand. And the big hand Corona had on Linda Cater's daughter, whose name was Andrea Nelson, being murdered and covered up in that house on Morningstar down there on the harbor, Huntington Harbor. The big hand Mike Corona had was calling the coroner's office, which is privately operated by people. The head coroner wasn't even born in America. I mean, it's what's happening to our services. We can't find any Americans that can serve as coroner. We have to hire people who are born in foreign countries. A lot of things are really, really wrong. But that's an aside. He calls the coroner 3 times. I asked the coroner. I personally asked that coroner, how often does the sheriff of Orange County, California, usually call in when you've got a murder? He says, maybe 1 time, maybe once. What was different about this? He called a 2nd time, and he called a 3rd time, and he was insisting that they list it as an accidental overdose of cocaine. Oh, wait a minute. Mike Corona, I want you to come on the show and deny that. I want you to come on my show and deny that. I want to give you equal time. While we still have freedom of speech, while we still have freedom of press, which is rapidly disappearing. You saw the glitches we had on the show today. When a government show, the city council meeting or something goes on the air, there's no glitches. It goes on just fine. But when we do public access and I touch on these bank gangsters and these issues that really affect people, somehow we have glitches. And then they want us to raise over $8,000 to Wi-Fi what we do here. Well, for years they've been telling us they couldn't spare the bandwidth, blah, 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 on and on. Anyway, Tony Rackauckas puts out this nice, slick little magazine and trying to make himself look like the good guy. Here's Tony Rackauckas right here. Right here. This is him. This is what I call the rat, or the Don of Orange County, the Mafia Don, right here. This guy right here. Tony Rackauckas. And I was there on the day they had the Victims' Rights March, and there were people holding placards all around him saying, Tony's a rat, Tony's a bad person. He allowed the murder of my child. What's this slick magazine he put out? I just, there's some nice DAs in there, some people who are trying to do good work, but you can't do good work when you're working for the devil himself. I mean, you can't do God's work when you're working for the devil. Here's a page. This is homicide victims in 2013, 2014, and right here in the bottom, right here, this guy with a cowboy hat, that's Kelly Thomas. He wasn't a victim of some mobster, some ludicrous bandit methodically going around robbing and killing. Here's Kelly Thomas right here. He was a victim of 2 city cops from a city which is to this day not apologized to the father and mother of Kelly Thomas. He was murdered by cops, literally beat down and crushed till he couldn't breathe. And you can see the video. It's on my, put in Kelly Thomas, it's on my YouTube channel. Just pull it up. You can hear him say, I can't breathe, and they're crushing him. Why? Because he was running away. Because you saw this criminal wearing a cop's uniform because he was a city cop in that city in Orange County. I get upset when I even think about it. These 2 city cops, one was named Cincinnati, but the other guy had a Spanish name. And you can see this happened at a bus stop in Fullerton, in the city of Fullerton. And they didn't, apparently the cops forgot they were on surveillance tape. They wrote up a false report, and then when they got the word, oh, there's a surveillance tape, then they had to get the report, had to shred the original report and write up another report because the report was felonious. And the chief of police had to leave Fullerton, and the city council of Fullerton just covered it all up. But there was a wrongful death lawsuit, and they paid out the mom $1 million in a settlement because mom and dad had been divorced, and maybe that was part of Kelly Thomas, who did have issues that made him homeless. He had 2 homes to go to. But God rest in peace, Kelly Thomas. The man did have some issues. But this one cop, he puts on rubber gloves. See these 2 fists? I'm going to F you up. Now, when a cop says, I'm going to F you up, he doesn't say, put your hands behind your back, I'm taking you into custody. I'm going to F you up. That's why I'm putting on these gloves. Because I'm going to smash your face. He's no longer performing as a cop. He's now performing as a thug in uniform. And let it be known, Fullerton, California hires thugs. They like to hire thugs. Even if they got to murder homeless people who already pushed so far down on the survivability scale that they're barely making. And that's why I find it funny that they put Kelly Thomas's picture as one of the murder victims right there. The guy with, but if you saw the video where his face is all bloodied, his eyes are swollen shut, he never recovers consciousness. He dies a day or 2 later. And the ambulance comes, and what do? The ambulance treats the little minor scuffles on the knuckles that the cops that were beating and crushing him to death had little scuffle while his face was bludgeoned because they smashed his face into the concrete and they crushed him so he couldn't breathe. And you can hear him saying, Dad, Dad, help me, Dad. And his dad is an ex-cop. So you got 2 cops killing the son of an ex-cop. That's how bad we need, we the people, grand juries. And bless his heart, Andy Caldwell on 1440 radio the other day, I've been told, I didn't hear it, but 3 people have called me and said, he's talking about the grand jury. We need to form grand juries. Yes, we do. You people sitting on your fat asses at home, feeling comfortable, saying, oh, look, there goes Mr. Wagener. He's going off Lulu again. He's a crazy man. Well, it won't be crazy one day when your child is murdered by cops. Or like what's happening with Jeff Golan right now, this minute, on May 3rd of 2017. They took his daughter a few years ago because she was retarded and she liked to go on adventure walks and she'd just wander away from home. Well, they took Nancy Golan away from Jeff and her mother and gave custody to the state, who plunked her in one of these regional centers, a for-profit holding tank for retarded. Then they started cutting off his visitation where he couldn't see his retarded daughter. And it's the only child they have. The only child. Their beloved child. And she would recognize her dad and she would grab his car keys. He said they'd go to visit her and she would pick up his car keys and look at him and say, you know, get me in your car, take me home. I hate this place, you know. But now she doesn't even recognize her dad. She's just like, he just called me. I have the message on my cell phone. I'm not going to play it for you, but last night they moved her to a dying house, also called a hospice place. And you look at the reviews, all the reviews of this place are awful. They say, if you want to get rid of a family member, this is the place you put them. They will die here pretty quick. That's where the state custodian of his daughter, Nancy Golan, moved her, and then he went to see her against my advice. I said, no, get a court order first. Have a neutral witness, and you go with a camera rolling. Get it all on tape. Just what happened. He was only there to see her 2 minutes. She didn't respond. They tried to talk to his daughter, Nancy. She's like giving up on life. She's starving. She's literally like coming out of a concentration camp, a skeleton. That's what state custody did. The more government you have, the worse it is for your Bill of Rights. Anyway, nice slick piece by the crooks of the district attorney's office. And shame on you if you hear this. Shame on you, Michelle Lipton. I called you twice. You wrote that letter telling Cindy Brown's mortgage fraud felony criminal to desist and refrain. And now you work for the crooked mafia don of the Bar Association for Orange County, Tony Rakalkas. I call him Tony the Rat. You work for him. Now you're exactly where you need to be to prosecute those people that have been trying to steal Cindy's home. For 10 years, she's still in it. And she's not able to do basketball gigs anymore. All her time is spent just going back and forth to the court, fighting to stay in her own home. And now she's an ADA rep trying to help other people. Cindy Brown's case number, by the way, case ID is 30-2016-0086-1086-CL-UD-CJC. Bank of New York Mellon versus Cynthia L. Brown, an unlawful detainer. How could she lose her house? She didn't even sign the mortgage note. It's all fraud. I've been in there where she shows Judge Stafford and enters into evidence the forged note. Now, Cindy's a very black woman. Very, very black, tall, good-looking, strong. She also has a concealed carry permit. You gotta remember that if you think you're just going to go barging into her house and point a gun in her face. She had a concealed carry permit. This is a person of note, a 1988 gold medal Olympian who represented the United States of America. And she's being treated like dirt by New York Bank Mellon. And Judge Stafford, who should be removed from the bench and placed in prison, he should be taken actually in handcuffs and shackles directly from the bench to the prison and held there without bail, because she put evidence that said, and you read the note, and it had a little where you check off Asian, black, white, Caucasian, other, and the guy forging the note said, I'm sitting with Cindy Brown, she's a check it off white woman, and she's obviously very black. Whoever forged that note was not sitting face to face as they claimed to be. And yet Judge Stafford looked and said, oh, yeah, I see that. You're obviously not a white woman. Yeah. He kind of chuckled about it and said, I'm still going to let the bank win. Move on. Next. Next victim. Next victim of Judge Stafford's court. All these courts are like this, except for James Regali, who granted a young Miss Dentamonte the other day. I happened to go down and see it for myself. He was merciful and did the right thing. She couldn't get her ADA representative to court to start trial on a civil restraining order, which is a bunch of nonsense in my opinion. To the Grandma Dentamonte, just let Angelina see the trust and the will, last will and testament, and the trust the grandfather set up, so she'll know how much, if anything, she's supposed to get. And just forget about all this crazy court stuff. But Judge Regali did the right thing. I mean, he went out and tried to call and see if we could get a backup ADA rep. They couldn't. Our courts are not prepared. They only got money for the judges' pensions and salaries and the clerks' pensions and salaries. They don't have money for actually doing the whole job. And when you listen to Diedzack, which we'll get back to, I hope, you understand why. But God rest you, God bless you, Antoine Scalia. This guy, they should put him on a monument overlooking the Supreme Court. Because this guy, this is from the Daily Journal, February 17th of 2016. This guy, Scalia, made this ruling in U.S. versus Williams, a 1991/2 ruling. And he wrote for the majority. Scalia wrote for the majority. And among the fact that said, yes, a grand jury can be misled because the prosecutor is not required to give all exculpatory evidence. But if there's really a big exculpatory fact, the grand jury should be told. But usually they're just there to tell the grand jury, this is why you must indict. Well, we must form, we the people grand juries of 25. They must be impeccable, no convictions, not even a wrongful conviction that's overturned or cleansed. That's the latest thing. Now, they will cleanse the record for you if you're a special person so that it doesn't come up. But some counties will still have the old records and it'll still be there. We the people grand juries, because you cannot trust the FBI when you got a cross-dressing gay pervert who blackmails all of the Congress, all of the U.S. senators like J. Edgar Hoover, and I have no reason to believe most of the FBI directors since him at the very, very top are any different than Hoover blackmailing people. The CIA is corrupt. We know George Herbert Walker Bush, who's still alive and should be in prison, was there at Dallas when JFK was killed, and so is George W. Why aren't they being indicted? Because we haven't formed we the people grand juries to do the work, and the rotten prosecutors we have in Santa Barbara, Orange County, virtually every county in America are not going to do the job if it's going to overturn the corrupt system. They work directly for Satan. I mean directly for Satan. I don't mean maybe they're bad once in a while. Occasionally they make a mistake. No, they're intentionally doing the wrong thing. That Jeff Golan's retarded daughter could be near death, and he's got to go get a judge's order, which the judge doesn't want to give because it'll embarrass the crooked satanic system. Jeff's only mistake was trusting the government in the beginning. And I told him the first time I met him, that's your mistake, Jeff. You thought the government was going to help you. No, they're not. The entire system is corrupted by this cancer called the Bar Association. And all their members become prosecutors, and the prosecutors become judges, and then the judges become appellate judges, and they're all corrupt. With, a few exceptions like Susan Yu, Michael Mins in Houston, Texas, Thomas Mesereau in Los Angeles, who was the lead defense attorney along with Susan Yu in defending Michael Jackson. But criminals like Robert Sanger and his bunch that took Ron Carrari's money, $90,000 plus, and then deliberately, and I was in the second trial, I watched it, deliberately did not raise all the objections they should have been raising because the prosecutor just had a cakewalk. Like, this is easy. The defense attorney's just sitting there letting me slam him with evidence that is not even relevant. If you think I'm upset, you're right, because I went to Vietnam. I put my life on the line. 5 of my cousins died. Captain Wagener died. Not my father, Captain Wagener, my cousin, Captain Wagener, died in Vietnam. Lieutenant Philip Overbeck, who I went to high school with, and his older brother, who I saw in Vietnam. Philip came back in a box. Lieutenant Philip Overbeck. His name's on that black wall, along with 4 other of my cousins. I was blown up, shot, bayoneted in Vietnam. And I didn't go through all that hell, come back and protect Fullerton cops that beat a homeless man to death. And yet the city here finds they have plenty of money to keep this facility open 40 hours a week for government productions, government editing, and educational, but they just can't only keep it open for 11 hours a week. And they wonder why there's fewer and fewer. They're begging for a lawsuit, just begging. But I'm being calm, trying not to be egged into it. I can't tell you for certain how long you will get any truth, even on this channel, which most of you don't watch because it's not high definition. That's because they don't want us to have high definition. I liked it better 15 years ago when all the channels had the same definition. We were analog, and we were all pretty much on the same page. But getting back to the grand jury, it's great that Andy Caldwell is talking about it on the radio. You people need to talk at your Kiwanis Club meetings, your Elks Club meetings. Any 25 of you, this is the important part of that ruling Scalia made. Any of you that sign the oath of office, register it with the county clerk. After it's notarized, your signature has to be notarized, can then meet. And the 25 or 17, 18, 19, 25 of you come together. You elect your own foreman. I'm telling you because the judges won't tell you. They want to have a judge appoint you so you're under the judge's authority. Then the judge can take you off the grand jury if you decide to indict the judge that appointed you. And I'm telling you, in my opinion, at least half of the judges in Santa Barbara County, 90% of them in Orange County, probably 95% in LA County, should all be indicted for multiple felonies and misprision of felonies. That's my opinion, because I go to court and watch crap far more than most of you people do. And I wish more of you would go to court instead of going golfing, instead of sitting around watching sitcoms. Go to the courts and watch the comedy. It isn't justice happening there, people. It's injustice. And it's all ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching for the money. And the reason they're still dangling Ron Carrara on a bullet that somebody put in his house to set him up while he was on probation, that was a setup. Oh, was his sister angry with them? Did we not see Dr. Carrari in the court saying, oh, I'm so afraid of me, so terrible. And that's when she was close with her dad. Now her dad kicked her out. He's realized what his daughter was doing. But it's taken up countless hours of court time. This is a family dispute. And I think, those two sisters should be in jail right now. Okay. Not for planting the bullet that got him violated. No. For the other things they did, they should be in jail. And we can't get into the other things. But hey, Dr. Carrari, you're welcome to come on my show and give me your point of view, just like I asked you when you came out of that courthouse in Lompoc over a year ago. And you were so afraid. Oh, my brother Ron is so violent. Oh, what a bunch of crap. I don't want to get into personal cases, but it all comes down to being personal. Okay. Nancy Golan is starving to death in a hospice murder facility while they're telling the real dad and mom, you can't even go in and touch your daughter's hair. You've got to just stand by and let the state kill your daughter because she took a walk. Well, guess what? Now she can't walk. She can't talk. Ever since the state took custody away from Jeff Golan. What happened in Nazi Germany, people? First they said we're going to get rid of all the mongoloid, retarded Jewish people. We're getting rid of them all. And once everybody got comfortable getting rid of these retarded people that were Jewish, then they said, well, we'll just get rid of all the Jews. Not just the retarded ones, because some of them snuck their retarded children out of the country. And then there was the 1936 Olympics. And after that Olympics, things got really nasty in Germany. So with that, I want to remind you again, you want to feel good? Want to feel good? Get John Henry Cassani's new CD, Fresh Off the Press. Fresh Off the Press. Today is the title of it. It's available at Paradise, Trading Post and Records in Orcutt, Boo Boo's in San Luis Obispo, Cheap Thrills in San Luis Obispo, On the Record in Pismo Beach, and the Game Exchange. So, with all that, I just want to remind you, if you're going to trust the government to fix it, they aren't going to fix it. They like stealing homes, stealing children, taking out bond numbers, taking money out of the SQ, the trust that you don't know anything about. All this is funding a Ponzi scheme where the billionaires get richer and richer, and it doesn't matter if you vote Democrat or Republican. You need to form grand juries and start taking evidence and indicting people. Before you can understand your authority, read what Scalia said in U.S. case 504 U.S. 36, U.S. versus Williams, 1992. He says the grand jury is above all three branches of government. So that kind of a grand jury we have never had in all the years, the decades I've lived in Santa Barbara. We need to form it, and I think two are already forming. I hope they do it right. I hope they do it right. But they need to have a jural society that's 20 times larger than the grand jury. So if Sheriff Bill Brown, or whatever the sheriff's name is in your county, doesn't do his job, they can refer to the jural society to call on the militia, which is every armed, able-bodied person, to come in and do their job. Arrest the people, the We the People grand jury indicts. Anyway, let's go back to Daniel Dydzak, if we still got that. I want to hear a little bit, and we'll be closing out on the music of John Henry Cassani, his song called Walk in the Light. But let's hear Diedzack, who really nails the crux of the justice system. He ought to know. He got pulverized and denied justice.
And I found out...
Take it away, Dan.
One of the people I was suing, of course, was Charles Schwab. His attorneys were Arnold and Porter, and his main attorney was Kenneth Hausman. I found out that the judge, who works for a big entity called McKinsey and Company, I found out that the judge, Gonzalez Rogers, was so corrupt, she and her husband are friends with several former Arnold and Porter partners who are Charles Schwab's attorneys. So here she,
wow,
and I found out...
That's cozy.
And I found out also, her attorney, Ronald George's attorney was Camilla Harris, now the senator, one of the senators from California. I found out she was good friends with Camilla Harris. And then, you're gonna love this, the present Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, Tanny Cantil-Saccu, who I was suing in other litigation, she gave an award to this judge. Now, this is all an award, a Woman Jurist of the Year award. So here you have a judge assigned to my case that's supposed to be fair and impartial. She should have divulged these conflicts, and she didn't do it. Her name is Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers. And you know why she did it? Because she's politically ambitious, and she wants to be on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, or possibly even on the Supreme Court of the United States.
Time out. Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers, I extend to you right now the opportunity to come on my show, On Second Thought, and express your retort against these allegations. I'm not saying he's wrong, I'm not saying he's right, but anyone, including George, whose name has been mentioned, I want to give you an equal opportunity to come on the show and defend yourself. Okay, so that's extended right now. So don't say you didn't have equal time. You saw me call.
Throughout my life, I know I will never die. I'm gonna walk in the light of Jesus, walk in His light. Talk in the light of Jesus, talk in His light. Tell all my brothers and sisters there is a way. There's no need for you or me to ever stray. I'm gonna walk in the light of Jesus, walk in His light. Talk in the light of Jesus, talk in His light. Tell all my brothers and sisters there is a way. There's no need for you or me to ever stray. So if you're feeling lonely and you feel you walk alone, the Lord is always with you, you should never feel alone. Call up to the Father for the light that fills your soul, and you'll never, never walk alone. I'm gonna walk in the light of Jesus, walk in his light. Talk in the light of Jesus, talk in his light. Tell all my brothers and sisters there is a way. There's no need for you or me to ever stray. I'm gonna walk in the light. You wanna talk in the light. You wanna walk in the light. You wanna talk in the light. You wanna walk in the light.